In March 1944, 10-year-old Eva Kor arrived in a cattle wagon at Auschwitz, and whilst the rest of her family were taken away to be killed in the gas chamber, she and her twin sister Miriam were spared, but only to be subjected to scientific experiments by the infamous Dr. Mengele.
I challenge anybody to imagine themselves sitting naked for 6 to 8 hours a day at the mercy of a group of scientists studying them. It is unbelievably demeaning, and the only way that I could cope with it is by blocking it out of my mind. Even in Auschwitz, I could not cope with the fact that they made me feel like I was nothing.
Eva can be seen here on the day after being liberated, having survived nearly a year of being one of Dr. Mengele's victims.
They injected a lot of injections, a minimum of 5 injections in my right arm. They were germs and chemicals. I was taken to the hospital. Next morning, Dr. Mengele and 4 other doctors came to study my case. Then Mengele declared, laughing sarcastically, he said, "Too bad. She's so young. She has only 2 weeks to live." I refused to accept his verdict. I refused to die.
Eva Kor has every reason to hate, but says instead that it's time to forgive.
I have only 2 choices. I bend under the burden, and then I become a victim, which I refuse to be. Or I forgive and then claim my power back because it is my decision, not because anybody asked me, not because somebody imposed upon me, but it's because I realize by taking back my power, by forgiving somebody, I actually give myself the gift of freedom.
Dr. Mengele, known as the Angel of Death, experimented on over 3,000 children at Auschwitz.
There were children who say that Mengele was very good to them, gave them cookies and chocolate, and was kind. I did not experience anything like that. I knew that we were at his mercy, and if he wanted us dead, we would be dead. I also knew that thanks to his experiments, we were alive. But I was aware that probably he sent my whole family to their deaths. I remember the doctors coming in twice a day to check my fever chart. And I remember often waking up on the barrack floor. I was crawling because I no longer could walk. And I was crawling because I found out that there was a faucet with water at the other end of the barrack. As I was crawling, I would fade in and out of consciousness. And I kept telling myself, I must survive. I must survive. Dying was very easy in Auschwitz. Living was a full-time job.
After the war, Eva eventually emigrated to America. She married another concentration camp survivor and settled in a small town in the Midwest. Here, with the spirit that helped her to survive the death camp, Eva set about making a new life for herself.
My body hurts. I have so many problems, health problems, that if I don't work out, I'm so tired that I can't function. And I realize that the only way I'm going to accomplish what I want to do is that I can function in a normal fashion. Somehow in the camp, they injected me with tuberculosis, and I got the germs from the camp. So I didn't know why I was having colds all my life. But about 2 years ago, I developed severe problems, and I was sick for about 5 months and no antibiotic helped. And I ended up at the Cleveland Clinic. And I am always kind of a joker about everything. I don't take things too seriously. And when the doctor said to me, well, let's have your family medical history. I said, doctor, you're so lucky. It's very short. It all ended in 1944 by being murdered by the Nazis.
Eva settled here in Indiana, where she managed to buy her own house in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Despite fears about her health as a result of Mengele's experiments, she managed to start a family of her own. Eva tried to put her past firmly behind her and make a new life for herself and her children in America. But being a foreigner in a strange country made it far from easy.
When I was younger, growing up in Terre Haute, Indiana, to 2 Holocaust survivors was no picnic. People made fun of my parents. I can remember coming home from a PTA meeting, a parent-teachers conference, where I had to translate at the age of 10 what my mom was saying to the teacher and what the teacher was saying to my mom, because her English was so bad. And at that same age, we walk home and there's swastikas on our house. I knew what a swastika was. My father knew what it was. My sister knew what it was. My mom obviously knew what it was, but my mom's reaction, I thought, was a little off the handle. My mom would want to find out who did it, and then would start chasing the kids around the house. It became the next day at school. The other classmates would say, what did you do last night? Oh, we went over to the Kor's house, and Mrs. Kor chases around the house. She's crazy.
Despite swastikas being daubed on the walls of her home, Eva was undeterred by the anti-Semitism she experienced. She became even more determined to fight prejudice and decided to preserve the memories of Mengele's children who, like her, had been used as human guinea pigs. In 1995, she established her own private museum to promote tolerance and racial harmony, but her dreams were shattered 2 years ago by intolerance and racial hatred when the building was firebombed.
In November 18, 2003, I was called by the police at just after midnight that the museum is on fire. I really couldn't comprehend that my museum was gone. All I wanted to do is come back inside and see what I could salvage. Of course, it was hot. The fire was still burning. Flames were still rising above the roof. And so we went to the sign on the road, and 2 reporters asked me, so how do you feel? And I said simply, I have had better days in my life. But then I remembered, of course, that I had had worse ones too. And I said, I am making here a pledge that I will rebuild in this place, the museum, whatever it will take. I am not giving up. I didn't give up in Auschwitz, and I'm not going to give up here.
The fire dominated the local news headlines and soon took on a far more sinister turn.
When we reported on the story that following day, we noticed that whoever was responsible or someone involved with the crime had written, "Remember Timothy McVeigh," on the side of the Holocaust Museum. Timothy McVeigh, the infamous terrorist who was responsible for the Oklahoma City bombing, was put to death at the local federal penitentiary here. I think most people realized that it was a hate crime and certainly targeted toward the Jewish faith and a Holocaust survivor. Of anyone I know, she certainly has the utmost reason to carry a grudge or to carry hatred in her heart for the Nazis that put her through that and her family. But she has carried the beacon of being forgiving and learning how to put this tragedy aside and continue living.
This is a picture of Miriam and me when we were 1 year old in 1935. It's a very cute picture. My mother used to be so proud of that picture, and she said that when we were that age, she used to put us in the window and people would walk by and say, are they dolls or are they real? And I don't know which one is me, really, I don't. I have a feeling this one looks more mischievous. So I think that's me, but I don't know. Well, this book with photos was in the museum, in the front room where all the displays were. And when the fire caught, that burned, but I pulled it out next day, and I decided that there was enough here to be saved and actually displayed the way it is here. This is the way hatred and prejudice looks when it is perpetrated against a little museum, and I hope that kids and people who will see that will try to remember it and prevent it. Only good that I can see is that up to now, we were not very well known in the world as a little museum. Because of the fire and because of the hatred that was perpetrated against us, the world knows about this little museum in Terre Haute, Indiana, that actually is dedicated to fighting hatred and prejudice. Thank you very, very much.
Community groups, schools, and even the local fire department donated funds to rebuild her museum. Eva became something of a local celebrity, and then international news organizations like CNN beat a path to her door.
First thing in the morning, we would go out for roll call, and somebody finally would yell at the top of their voice, "Mengele is coming!" And then we would straighten out like little soldiers by our bunk beds.
Interest in her story has grown so much, she's decided to take a group of teachers and students back with her to Poland to witness the 60th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz.
I want to entrust these people who are going with me with the promise that they will teach it, talk about it, and learn the lessons from it.
Many in her party have heard Eva speak at public meetings, spreading her message about forgiveness and tolerance.
Okay, let's go, girl. Let's go.
Eva, now 70 years old, wants to pass on the message that forgiveness is the only way future generations can come to terms with prejudice and hatred.
In every school in the world, in the civilized world and any other place, we teach children from grade 1 reading, writing, and arithmetic. And then if somebody calls them a name or somebody even hits them, instead of go and hit back and get even, forgive them. Heal yourself of that burden that somebody called you four eyes, or dirty Jew, or nigger, or whatever curse word or dirty word the child. And children are very mean. Let's be honest about it. They all want to feel better by putting somebody else down. If we teach them, instead of getting even, to forgive this person and therefore remove that curse from their shoulder, I think we are going to teach a little bit more than just reading, writing, and arithmetic, and it's a skill.
At Chicago's International Airport, Eva has arranged to meet her son, Alex, who'll be joining the group for the overnight flight to Poland. There, they'll meet with other survivors at the death camp, not all of whom are able to share Eva's commitment to forgiveness.
The departure time is 7 o'clock. We're going to start boarding at 6:30. We have gate MA36A at your seat.
As I look at these people who have survived 60 years later, and you talk to many of them, they are still angry, they are still bitter, and they still have a heaviness about that experience that they cannot shake, and anger. People who are angry and bitter are not happy people. So that experience and the fact that they have not been able to heal themselves by forgiving and freeing their spirit from what was imposed upon us, that is a tragedy. I believe that forgiveness is a skill for good life. Just like reading, writing, and arithmetic is a skill we learn.
In January this year, the 60th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz was marked with a huge ceremony attended by presidents, heads of state, and dignitaries from all corners of the globe. Camp survivors once again experienced the bitter cold, listening to heartfelt speeches as the world's media looked on.
To the former prisoners, I do extend particular greetings.
For many of them, forgiving Nazi war crimes was the last thing on their minds. Even Eva's son, Alex, had his doubts.
When I first heard about this, a Hungarian TV reporter flashed a microphone in my face and said, "Well, your mom's forgiving Mengele, what would you do?" And at the first thought, I said, "Well, I'm not sure I could do that." But I've tried, and I think I definitely understand her reasons, and the more I listen to her, the more it makes sense to me too. And I didn't believe it when I first heard it. I thought it was, just another idea. But the more I listen, the more it makes sense. At some point in history, this eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth has got to stop. And one way to stop it is to try to think like my mom thinks. And that way is to maybe say, enough is enough. I'm not going to take hate to my grave, and that the power of forgiveness can help people.
They are afraid that at the 70th anniversary there won't be that many survivors who are going to be able to make the trip.
Although Eva has every intention of returning to celebrate the next anniversary, her son Alex knows that as each year passes by, fewer and fewer eyewitnesses remain to tell their stories.
At some point in the future, the second generation will have to speak on behalf of the Holocaust survivors. And I think that the second generation's words will be much better than anything they can read in a textbook. They won't be able to see the Holocaust survivors except on videotape. But the second generation, myself, my sister, my cousins in Israel, it's very important that we as a generation continue to remind people what bad things can happen.
Access to certain areas of the camp was strictly controlled. For the first time, former prisoners, identifiable by their tattooed numbers, enjoyed privileged status.
I had no pass to get down here, and she showed the number and I got in. I would be up there in the rafters.
Now the biggest benefit I got from that number so far.
Eva stole food to keep herself and her sister Miriam alive. She was a stubborn, tenacious and streetwise little girl. But the crematoria chimneys at Auschwitz provided a constant reminder of how the rest of her family had died in the gas chamber. Now her mission in life is to perpetuate those memories and pass them on to a younger generation.
Right there is a hatch. They would open that hatch and drop the Zyklon B. Zyklon B operated like dry ice. And when it would fall to the floor, And then the dry ice turned to gas, and the gas was rising. So you can see the hatch there. They would go on the roof of the gas chamber and drop it in. And then once the bodies were dead, the workers would come in with gas masks and start moving the bodies, remove all the gold teeth. The hair was cut, as you saw, the big piles of hair, and use the mattresses. The fat was often trimmed to be used as soap.
No.
Yeah, I was given a bar of soap from May of 1944, and I washed with it until, unfortunately, May of 1946, at which time I attended a memorial service, and the rabbi told us that if anybody had any soap from the camps, to please bring it next day for a memorial service, because it was made out of human fat. Unfortunately, I still had 2 bars of soap, because during the war, soap was something very important commodity that you couldn't find easily, and therefore I kept it and I used it. But from that time on until probably 4 years later, when I arrived in Israel, I could never wash with soap, because I had nightmares that I washed with soap made out of my own parents and sisters. Just because we were liberated, as we all know, we were not really free from the after effect of what happened here. Yeah.
I light this candle to keep alive the memory of the Holocaust forever in the minds of all the generations to come, and in my father, Robert J. McPeak's name, who was also a liberator.
I light this candle in honor of Eva.
To commemorate those who had died in the camp, each member of Eva's party has brought with them a symbolic candle.
I light this candle for my grandpa Bob, who fought in World War II.
Oh. I am passing on this torch to you, to all of you today, with the hope that you can teach the world about what happened here in Auschwitz, work to eliminate hatred and prejudice, and teach the world to heal by forgiving those who hurt us. But that's a small sample, a tribute to those who have died here and are not forgotten. And candles, it always has 2 significant things. One is a memorial to those who died. Second is to illuminate dark places in the world. And this is a pretty dark place that needs to be illuminated.
Alex has been here before with his mother. But however many times he returns, there are new discoveries to be made, new insights to be had.
The train arrived here on this track, stopped. We waited there for a while, then the doors opened, a mass of people poured out. In this case, right was death, left was life, going to the camp.
I think that it's a place that I come to celebrate my mom's liberation. It's a place I come to acknowledge what happened in the past and to learn the lessons that we can tell future generations in the future. I come here for many reasons. It inspires me, it motivates me, knowing that my mom survived and my father survived another camp. And I think for them.
It's okay. It's okay. It's all right. It's okay to cry.
So I think it means a lot to me to be here.
When the Russians arrived on January the 27th, 1945, much of the camp was in flames, torched by the retreating Nazis in an attempt to cover up their crimes.
See, I think it's down there because this tower.
No, it was one single time we walked through and we turned. There's a bell.
Eva and her son are trying to find the precise spot where she was filmed 60 years ago, when the Russians found 7,000 inmates who remained in the camp. Amongst them were Eva and her sister, seen here walking hand in hand through the electrified barbed wire perimeter fence.
I had no idea that this chubby girl up here was me. The day we were marching between these two barbed wires, and I was very surprised that there was a big camera crew with a huge film crew, and I said, oh gosh, must be we are some kind of movie stars like Shirley Temple, and that's all I knew about movies. But I did what they told me to do, to march between the barbed wires and turn and then show our numbers and all that. I am saying, hey, I survived! They made it into a film, and I can show people that's me. When I look at that face, I say, boy, you were a tough cookie. And I look like a tough cookie. Chubby, but tough.
Eva's full name is Eva Moses Kor. She was brought up in a devout Jewish family where all the religious rituals and festivals like Passover were strictly observed.
Some big shoes. If we want to connect that to Passover, let's say that these are the children of Israel crossing the Red Sea after escaping from Egypt. We were free here in that picture, but good grief, it took us, me, 50 years to be free inside. The emotional freedom, which is really extremely important. Physical freedom is necessary before one can work on the emotional freedom and forgiveness. It took the children of Israel to march through the desert for 40 years before they were emotionally willing to be free in the land of Israel. So even Moses was smart enough to realize that just because he saved them from slavery in Egypt, didn't mean that they were free. My spirit is a lot higher than most people's. And there is a feeling of well-being, of feeling comfortable in who I am and where I am going with my life. Finding somebody else who's coming back is more a sense of victory than any kind of sense of defeat. And victory, you always are happy with victory, you're not crying. And also I feel that the sense of being a victim has long gone by.